Welcome everyone to another episode of Retro Wrestling Reviews. Fredo Esparza here, and this week we look back at Mid-South Wrestling's December 23rd, 1981 episode. Before we begin, just a reminder to be sure to subscribe to the Retro Wrestling YouTube channel. We're constantly updating with new reviews, shows we can come up with, but at the moment, mostly reviews. This episode of Mid-South Wrestling was taped on December 9th, 1981 at the Irish McNeil's Boys Club in Shreveport, Louisiana. Boyd Pierce was joined this week by Cowboy Bill Watts on commentary. They mentioned that it's not too late to send in picks for your dream match, which will start on the first week of 1982. Watts mentions some exciting news concerning Dusty Rhodes and Mid-South Wrestling will be coming up. I think he worked some of the bigger shows because they did air his promo about Kabuki, his feud with Kabuki at this point also. I think it might have been the following episode that they showed that. Definitely that's one of the matches that they were going to have on one of the bigger shows. Very first match on the show is Mike George and Carlos Zapata beating Jerry Novak and Ricky Ferrara after George hits Ferrara with a dropkick for the pin. Carlos Zapata replaced the Junkyard Dog, who was dealing with some knee problems. And this was a very short match. Not much to the match. Very short. I think the only thing that probably would have helped this was that if JYD was working this match, it would have been a little bit more entertaining. But it was short, which was the case for most of the matches on this show. That is then followed by the continuation of the Precious Paul Ellering and the Iron Sheik $1,000 Persian Club Challenge. They show a recap of last week's challenge, and quickly we go back to the ring where Iron Sheik has to do 100 Persian Club reps. The ring announcer loses count while the Iron Sheik is doing the 100 Persian Club reps. Sheik kept going and did over 100 reps. Reezer Bowden claims he did 103 reps. Ellering wants to do more reps and thinks he can do 444 reps. Ellering ends up getting to about 52 reps when the Iron Sheik decides to attack him. Watts starts to compare this to some of the world political issues that were going on during that time period, which is something Bill Watts did frequently throughout the Mid-South run. Always brought up something. If there was a storyline involving a foreigner or a wrestler who was a foreign character, like the Russians or the Libyan or anything like that, he always brought up something that was going on within the world politically. Sheik puts Ellering in a camel clutch, but Ellering breaks out. The brawl continues. General Skandar Akbar ends up attacking Ellering with the Iranian flag. That leads to Akbar and the Iron Sheik beating on Ellering until several referees come out to stop them. That is then followed by what was the best match on the show, which was Paul Orendorf beating Brian Blair via referee's decision. This was a good match, fast-paced action. Blair gets Orendorf in the figure 4 leg lock. Bob Roop, who was seconding Orendorf, gets up from his seat and tells Orendorf to reverse it. Orendorf then reverses the hold on Brian Blair. Blair refuses to give up, so referee calls for the bell. So this ends up being the referee ends up deciding to give the win to Paul Orendorf because, I think I can't remember because I saw this with Memphis as well, where they would just depending on how the referee saw it, they would make the decision on who would win the match. And in this case, he went with Paul Orendorf. Mostly because Brian Blair wouldn't. Brian Blair basically when the figure 4 was reversed, he wouldn't give up. So because he was the one that I guess was in pain, but refusing to give up, they gave the win to Paul Orendorf. After that match, Ted DiBiase beats Mike Boyer with a figure 4 leg lock, which was just continuation of their the whole DiBiase Orendorf Bob Roop storyline, where now you have Ted DiBiase using the figure 4 leg lock. Bill Watts mentioned that during the commercial break, DiBiase had checked in on Brian Blair. This again was another short match, but what's really good about Mike Boyer is that he really is a hell of a bumper, and he did that really well for Ted DiBiase, and it was still a very short match. After that match, we get a tag team match, as Bob Roop and Bob Orton Jr. team up to beat Mike Bond and Frank Monte after a pile driver by Orton Jr. on Mike Bond for the pin. This was another short match, although I thought this was a pretty good short match. Orton and Roop worked really well as a tag team. Again, the combination of Roop, Orton Jr., and Orendorf, whoever's in a tag team, they are really good. They're a really good tag team. Would have been fun to have seen them as more of a regular tag team. We don't get that frequently, especially because both Roop and Orendorf are challenging for the North American Heavyweight title. After the tag match, we get Ed Wiskowski beating Tom Renesto Jr. with a side backbreaker. This was another short match. This kind of felt like this was really what the show was all about, just a lot of short matches. With that one match that really went a little bit extra longer was the Orendorf Blair match, and then they gave a lot of time to the Iron Sheik Paul Ellering Persian Club Challenge. After that match, we get Iron Sheik versus Don Serrano, which ends in a no contest. Iron Sheik attacked Serrano before the bell rang, and he stomped on him and tossed him to the outside. Once he tossed him to the outside, Paul Ellering ran in and attacked the Iron Sheik. That led to General Skandar Akbar pulling Iron Sheik out of the ring, and they left the ringside area. Again, this was another short match. They immediately went to what was the storyline that was going on throughout the show. But like I said, a lot of short matches. Thought the show was okay. Best match on the show was Paul Orendorf versus Brian Blair. All the other matches were kept pretty short, and I would definitely describe them as squash matches. They did a good job with the Iron Sheik versus Paul Ellering feud, continuing from the previous week onto this episode, and then closing out with Ellering trying to get his revenge. If you're going to watch anything from this episode, watch the Orendorf versus Blair match. And I guess watch the rest only if you really must watch the entire episode. But like I said, just Orendorf versus Blair is the match to watch on this week. Rest of the show, I mean, like I said, a lot of short matches. Be sure to subscribe to the Retro Wrestling YouTube channel, as I said, where we'll have more wrestling show reviews as well as the Lucha World podcast and other content available. Also, be sure to visit the website retrowrestling.com for classic wrestling reviews. And for Lucha, visit my website, luchaworld.com. For added content, you could check us out and subscribe to our Patreon at patreon.com/luchaworld. Thanks again, everyone, and we will talk to you guys again real soon.